Welcome to Mom Boss Central. I'm your host, Alexia Hoffman. This podcast is where entrepreneurial moms like you and me come together for real and raw conversations filled with practical tips, genuine stories, and a whole lot of girl power. But it's not just about listening, it's about building a community. If you haven't already, make sure to join at mombosscentral.com. So whether you're sipping on a cup of coffee, pouring yourself a glass of wine, or tuning in on the go, get ready to join the conversation and become part of our supportive Mom Boss Central community. I'm here with Steph. Steph, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you on. Will you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. So I am Steph Grainger. I am mum to three. My three sons are all in their 20s now. So I've been parenting for quite a long time, but they are all now technically adults and grown up. But I still have two living at home with me. One has flown the nest a couple of years ago. I'm UK based, if you probably can figure that out by the way I talk. And I'm also a female business owner, and I have been in business for myself since 2010. I'm a therapist, and I work solely with women, and I basically trained in all the things that brought me back to life and helped me become the woman I am today. So I am the woman I needed about 20 years ago.
I love that. I think that is so cool to hear. So we'll start there. I mean, what advice do you have for yourself 20 years ago?
Oh my goodness. There's so much I would say to myself 20 years ago. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't stop criticizing how you look in the mirror. You are perfect just as you are. You have, at that point, I would have birthed two children. You know, look what you can do. Look how incredible your body is. All of the things that superficial things that as women we really struggle with. I would have also said to myself 20 years ago, you need to get some support and you need to start healing, because it's the only way that you're going to feel better inside out.
Wow. Yeah, that's so amazing. I think that healing is something that we don't speak about enough, especially in relation to our business journeys. And being a mom, I think, for me, I hear a lot about generational transitions and trying to be better for our kids. But, in the context of business as well, it is so important to heal and to have your mindset right, and to be, the best version of yourself requires a lot of work that isn't business related or isn't necessarily mom related even. So I love that you're talking about that. Can you tell us a little bit about when your business got started in relation to, how old your kids were and kind of what that looked like?
Yeah, sure. I decided to start my own business as I was going through a divorce, which was not the best time, but equally it was actually the most opportune time for me as well, because I was starting to find myself again and shedding and getting rid of some really outdated layers that life had created for me. So I started my business when my youngest son started going to school. So that was around the age of 5. So I was then a single mum. And I went back to work because I had to, because I was going through divorce. Actually started to realize that I wanted more. I didn't want to just do this boring office job. And I didn't want my kids to see that that's how it is. That's what life looks like. So my entry into being a female business owner was to be a doula. So I'm sure you're aware of what a doula is.
Yes.
And I began doulaing in 2010, and that really opened the door to everything. I always call doulaing my gateway drug because it very much showed me a whole different way of being and living and supporting women through this big transitional time in their life. Just changed everything for me, changed my perspective, and it really gave me a sense of purpose. And I was actually making change. I was actually creating change for somebody else and holding space so they could, take these, make these big decisions and birth in a way that felt right for them and make informed choices. And it really just opened up that possibility that actually, as women, we can do anything if we want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's such an interesting transition to the business world because
Mhm.
wow, to see life come into the world and to make those, be there for those impactful moments, I think must be so inspiring to really change your view on what business could be. Because I think that, it's sometimes we get caught up in um, a conventional or traditional thought of something, but to really realize that there is no caps on the goals that we set for our life or what we want to do to feel fulfilled. So I think that's amazing. How was it? I mean, having you said, going through your divorce, having a son starting school and then starting your business. Talk about, how that season felt for you and what you experienced.
I think it was a huge distraction. I think it gave me like that sense of purpose and that drive, and let's start going after the life that you've been craving for a long time. It
Mm.
also was an act of suppression, I guess, as
Mm.
well. It gave me something just to forget all the stuff that's going on in the background and just ignore all of that and keep driving. So it did come at a
Mm-hmm.
cost sometimes, because be the path I chose as well to be a doula was not a 9 to 5 pathway either. So I
Yeah.
didn't make my life particularly very easy, but I was giving myself that balance of really feeling sadness and heartbreak at the end of a relationship, and then
Mm.
seeing transition of woman to mother and that kind of life, people coming to life. It kind of balanced all that out for me and gave me a sense of perspective. So it was a really beautiful time in my life, as well as a
Mm-hmm.
really difficult in my life as well. Really was.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like there was a lot, that you had to process and go through in that season. Do you have any specific challenges that you faced and overcame that you could speak to and give advice to moms listening?
Absolutely. I think that this is where my healing began. This is where I started to think, actually, I need to do some self-healing here. It brought everything to the surface that maybe was what I know was from the past. I've dealt with grief. I lost my sister before I became a mum. So
Mhm.
I hadn't dealt with any of that either. I just kind of
I'm so
plowed myself
sorry.
into being a mother. So
Yeah.
it as I was kind of going through that transition, and having my eyes open to a different way of being, because when you see women challenging the status quo, that you don't have to birth a certain way and we get to do things how we want to do them, it
Mhm.
almost gave me permission to start thinking, and I get that to do that as well. I get to now start making decisions and choices for me. So whilst it was a really dark time and it was a really challenging time, I was navigating, divorce with my children and everything
Mhm.
else, it, as I say, it still kept me moving forward, and pushing myself in a direction that was more effective and more aligned with the life that I wanted to lead. So I would say, in what saved me at that point was the self work, the healing, was starting to really pay attention to myself and not just giving all my focus to my children, but also making myself a priority as well at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did that healing journey look like for you and what kind of self-work were you doing?
So it started with grief therapy, grief counselling. I started to go down that road first to start processing, because the grief of losing my sister was obviously very different to the grief of my marriage breakdown, but it was still grief,
Mhm.
and it was starting to process the grief. So it was very much talking therapies at that point. Um, and then I started to look at other methods. So I started seeing different types of therapists, emotional freedom techniques, more commonly known as tapping. I was doing things like that.
Mm.
I was doing hypnotherapy, was just so helpful for me. And I'd also trained at that time as a hypnobirthing teacher. So I was teaching
Oh,
women to
wow.
use hypnosis in childbirth. So I could see the power of
Yeah.
the mind and body connecting.
Mhm.
So I was really intrigued by that. So I was working with a hypnotherapist that was helping me to start to process a lot of what I'd experienced as well. So I just started to look at what was available and what would be most effective for me. And it was very much the mind body connection that I was really attracted to,
Mm.
and has been absolute game changer for me in respect of healing.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to hear you talk about because of where your line of work is now, how so much has pointed you in that direction. And I feel like for
Yeah.
me, I felt something similar with coming and creating this community for, mom entrepreneurs. I felt like I can look back now and see how all these different things were pointing me here, but I didn't see it, and it takes
Mhm.
going through that journey of learning about yourself and doing things
Yeah.
that fulfill you in that season, but maybe long term lose that full passion that they once brought you. I think it's important for us to listen to those experiences and find what about that brought us joy. Like you said, it was the mind and the body connection and the power within that, where at the time, we might not be able to identify that true why. It might seem
Yeah.
attractive for a different reason, but if you actually look at the theme of things that have fulfilled you in your life, a lot of the times I think we can find a deep rooted why that's pointing towards something bigger, which a lot of us ends up being our entrepreneurial ventures, right? But it's so interesting the path that we take to get here, because a lot of the times it's not point A to point B. It's A to D and A to C and A to Z and then back to B. So I love that
Yeah.
that you are able to tie it back so clearly to what attracted you to being a doula and then creating your business. So that's
Mm.
so
Mm.
fascinating to me.
I absolutely, like, when I look at the timeline now and I look at the journey, I guess, that I've been on, it's all very obvious to me now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was just one door opening gently, then another door opening
Mm,
gently, and me actually being able to see, okay, it's time to close that door. And when I moved away from the doula work, it was because my children needed me for different reasons, and I wanted to come more present into my home. But I'd also ignited this passion in hypnotherapy and the power of the mind and everything else. Then I went off to train in those directions in a much more intensive way.
mm,
And that ignited a whole different thing in me. It's like, this is actually the work I'm supposed to be doing.
yeah.
But it's not just women in childbirth now. I mean, I still consider myself a doula, but I consider myself doulaing women at any transitions that they need to make in their life now. So it's not
Mm,
just about childbirth, transitioning from mother to entrepreneur again, or
yeah.
finding next steps, and I'm gently supporting them in the same way that I would have done as a doula. It's just I'm not on call 24 hours a day anymore doing it.
Yeah, I love that analogy and kind of the similarities in that. So, for someone who has been an entrepreneur and is now a new mom, what would advice
Mhm.
do you have to say to them? Because I went through that about almost 18 months ago. I was an entrepreneur, I became a mom. What advice do you have for moms that are in that season of newborn and business and trying to navigate what that new balance looks like?
I would say stay really connected to yourself in that part. When even now when I go off and I think actually I'm really overwhelmed, or I feel really touched out, or I'm feeling really stretched at the moment. What's going on? And I don't have the demands of small children anymore, but it's because I've become disconnected to myself. I've stopped listening to my body. I've stopped listening to what's going on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring it back and come back to myself. Actually, what do I want? What is going on? Can I be more kind to myself? How am I being compassionate and kind with myself this week? What am I
Yeah.
doing to support myself this week? There's that whole analogy of, am I putting my oxygen mask on first here? Probably not. I'm depleted.
Mm,
How can I bring my energy levels back up or recharge myself? So
yeah.
when I first discovered the whole process of tracking your cycle as a starting point, and this was again when I became a doula, this whole understanding of the power of the female cycle,
Mm-hmm.
it was a game changer for me, because it was like, I now understand why that part of the month is more difficult for me than this part of the month. And
Mm,
I'm not going to make decisions at that time of the month anymore. I'm going to start tracking this and be kinder to myself in that week,
mm,
because I know the following I'm going to feel energy again. I'm going to build and I'm going to be much more powerful. So
yeah.
I think it's always for women about coming back to themselves and think, what am I doing to look after? Am I making myself a priority? What is my body doing right now as well? And
Mm-hmm.
what does it need from it? That
Yeah.
inside out approach is crucial for women all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. Wow, that is so insightful. And I have to admit, I haven't spent enough time studying, but I have heard about our energy levels being tied to our cycle and things like that. So for someone who isn't super knowledgeable in that space, I mean, what should I be aware of or looking for throughout the month or throughout the year even regarding cycles and right now I'm breastfeeding, so I'm not necessarily having a cycle, but what should I
Yeah.
be kind of keeping an eye out for?
I just started to look at my moods and started tracking what my moods what was happening with my energy levels. So I'm very good now at knowing, and I'm in a perimenopausal phase now, so I'm kind of adjusting to that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But started to look at what times of the month do I start to really beat myself up and feel not good enough and think I'm not doing what I'm not there for my children as much, or my business, I'm not being I don't know, as powerful in my business. And I started to see, okay, I'm going to write that down
Yeah.
and then pick up the again. And I started to really notice that 1 week of the month, which is my premenstrual week of the month,
Mm-hmm.
is when I'm the most harsh to myself. It's when the noise is the loudest in my head. It's when I
Mm.
doubt myself
Yeah.
most. So I will give myself a little bit of slack that week and just think, maybe my diary needs to be quieter this month. Maybe I don't make those big decisions. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't work with clients that week because I'm not serving my clients well. And because I know it will pass. I know next week the energy's coming back. So it's just watching and looking for the signs and just leaning into yourself and thinking, what's going on for me? What's
Yeah.
actually going on for me this week? You start to notice the pattern, you do, and then you can adjust your diary accordingly, or just look after yourself better at those types of the months. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that self-reflection, I think that is so important, but it's interesting to think of it in the context of cyclical behaviors that we have with ourselves, because I think, awareness is a lot of the times the first step we have to take, but then to track it and tie it in, I think would be so
yeah,
insightful, because I do find
yeah,
myself, I can look back and say, okay, I've been really hard on myself, but I've never thought about it in the context of, the week within the month or day within the week even. So, yeah, that's
yeah,
definitely something that I can apply. And I appreciate you sharing that. That's really
yeah.
interesting and insightful. So with, when you got started with your business and then you transitioned to, from being a doula to the coaching world, speak about how it was with raising your kids and running the different businesses.
As I made that transition, my youngest son was around 15, 16. So that was a challenging time in itself,
Mm-hmm.
having teenagers, and he was in school and he was not enjoying being in school at
Mm.
that time. So the transition was almost forced, but actually on reflection, it was absolutely right
Mm-hmm.
as well. It was a point in my life I was like, actually, I've got to pull back here and just take some time to think about what I want to do next. And being able to have that space,
Yeah.
support him at the same time, actually then allowed me to think, what do I want now? What do I want to be doing? And is doulaing something I want to continue? And it was a very clear no, that's the end of this chapter now. That's
Mm.
absolutely time to move forward. But it did come back to that, stop and hit the pause button and think about, what do you actually want to do though,
Mm-hmm.
and not just keep power forward. And that whole conditioning of just keep going,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I don't buy into I'm not buying that anymore. It's actually something's telling me to stop for a moment in time, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to reflect, and I'm going to think about, what do I want to be doing in this moment, and how can I pivot myself
Mm-hmm.
into that environment. So it's challenging, very challenging, because you start to question everything, because my identity had become a doula, and I was very well known in
Yeah.
my network, and I was very busy as a doula, and I had, I'd worked with probably over 60 women at this point
Oh,
and
wow.
supported them, and stepping out of that was frightening again. It was that uncomfortableness when you were well established in something, but equally you have to listen. You have to listen to what's going on, because there is, and trust that something else is ready for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trust in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did you know? You said that, even though it was hard, you had like a certainty that it was time for that season to be done.
Yeah.
How did you know, or, what did you kind of listen for?
I think it's that leaning into your intuition and just the more you listen to what your intuition is telling you, the louder it gets.
Mm.
So the more I was trusting in that process. So there was just something saying to me, this is, you're feeling the effects of this now. It's very emotionally and physically challenging on you now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't listen, it's that whole the body keeps score and it always wins. If you don't listen, it will take you down.
Yeah.
And it will. And recovery after birth with each lady that I was working with was getting longer, and I was starting to feel the effects more, and actually it was then impacting on my downtime with my family. And it was actually something's got to give here, and it isn't going to be my body, and it isn't going to be my mind.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing that you could identify that and not kind of shove it away. Like I feel like we often do as business owners,
Yeah.
push down, the urge to rest or to pause. So I love that.
Well, the urge to as well not be seen as a failure or someone that gives up on something, or someone that, when you look like you're successful, the dialogue in your head is saying you need to stay working at this now, because no, you don't walk away from success. You don't walk away from that.
Yeah.
And the urge can be to keep going and keep going. Whereas it was very much clear in my head that if I kept going, I was going to find it even harder each time. And I wanted to be present for my family. That's what I was doing it all for first.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that is like so interesting. Like you said, we have to kind of hold on to that level of success that we achieve. But I think it's so important to really reflect on what we're identifying as success if we're not feeling fulfilled. Because I think at the end of the day, it's easy to tie success to a certain achievement, whether it be a financial achievement, a title that we've earned, a position that we worked so hard to get to. But at the end of the day, if you're not feeling fulfilled, then what was the point of the achievement in the first place? Because I think so often we go after something because we think it's going to make us feel a certain way, but then we've done the work, we get there and we don't feel that way, or we lose that feeling. And then we feel, at least, I can say I felt like trapped. Like, okay, I did the work. This is what I wanted. I got it. And now am I ungrateful if I am no longer fulfilled in this season? And I think it's important to identify, no, it's okay. It's okay for your desires and your goals to change, because like we said earlier, it's all pointing you towards something bigger in a different capacity. So I think that is so huge. But when you were, in that season, you said it took away from time with your family and how you showed up for your family. What advice do you have for moms that are struggling with how they're showing up for their family and struggling with work-life balance?
the elusive work-life balance is something we're all chasing, and something we believe that we can achieve. And I don't know if I've ever really achieved it fully to the degree that I expected to. But I think it's one of those things, but that we're constantly chasing. I've got to get this balance right. I've got to get this balance right. And I think, again, it comes back to, for me, is, well, first of all, stop looking at what other people are doing, and because the more we compare ourselves as parents, as mothers, and what we see another mother doing, or what we see on social media, or all of those things, means that we then set our bar even higher, and then we're trying to achieve something that's not even ours to achieve. It's something else is trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think we be really, really influenced easily by. I mean, I wasn't, when I was parenting my children as young children, I didn't have to contend with social media.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of those things, and I'm very grateful for that as well, because there was no WhatsApp groups of parents from schools. There was no social media presence. So there was no pressure of, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm achieving everything, and I've got a very successful business, and my children are always happy, and all of this stuff that we can sometimes see that's not necessarily accurate. That's on our screens. So I would say the first thing to do is stop looking at what other people are saying they're achieving, because the chances are they're not achieving that.
Yeah.
And stop comparing yourself to other mothers and what other people are doing on your screens. That's where I would start first, almost. But again, it always comes back to that connection to myself. I work really hard to stay connected to who I am and what aligns with my values, and what the mother I want to be.
Yeah.
And if it's feeling like something is out of balance one way or the other, then I will make the necessary adjustments to bring it back into balance that I consider balance.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, I think, so important too. Like what you consider balance might be different than what I consider balance, and that's
Yeah,
okay, but we need to listen
exactly.
to ourselves, and it goes back to that comparison of really trusting your definition of success, trusting your definition of what you need for rest, because you might need more or less than someone else, and that's okay. But if you're
Yeah.
not listening to your body's or mind's definition of that, you're going to push yourself to a point of burnout or, lacking fulfillment. So I think that's really, really good insight. And I think it's good for our listeners to hear someone else say a lot of the time. Like, it's easy to say it to ourselves, but then we're also the first one to discount our own advice, right? So to hear you say that
Yeah.
as your advice, I think is really helpful. I know you have shared about, going through a divorce and having young kids. For any of our listeners that might be in that season who are also trying to run a business and juggle kind of all the emotions that come with that season, what would you say to them or to yourself in that season looking back?
I would say find your people, and find your support system, your lifeline.
Mm,
It's what kept me going. It is having my circle of friends and my network as well. So it
yeah,
was people that were in business. I surrounded myself with like-minded women in business, and I regularly spent time with other women in business. I still do.
yeah,
Um, and I think finding my people and actually letting go of those that weren't going to empower me and inspire me and uplift me and support me
yeah,
as well in the way that I needed to be supported, was absolutely the saving grace for me. But having that network and having that those that you can just reach out to and get that support from, and alongside the actual professional help as well. So the therapists and the people that I spoke to in that capacity as well, and actually investing in myself and making myself a priority so that I could start the healing process as well as doing everything else I wanted to do. But that had to be a priority, that I started to heal.
yeah, yeah. I think that's such great advice. And I think it just keeps coming back to community. I know that in all different seasons and stages, having that community really can be the difference between propelling forward and kind of overcoming and not
Yeah.
having the ability to thrive in that season, because it can be so isolating. Being a mom could be isolating in itself. Being a business owner can be isolating in itself. I can imagine going through divorce can be very isolating also. So to really reaffirm, that community aspect of mom boss central, of, like-minded women that can provide support, provide advice, but that don't have any judgment because they've been through a similar season. They understand all the moving pieces that come with running a business, running a household, raising children. I mean, it can just be so much and so overwhelming. And then to throw in doing the work of healing and, self improvement on top of everything else can feel so daunting sometimes. So, how do you suggest someone who doesn't feel they have the time to pursue healing? What would you say to them?
I would say you have the time. You need to make it a priority. We all can make it a priority should we choose. I understand that healing is difficult. I understand that it's painful and we have to face things that we maybe have put in a box a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But you're never going to take those steps forward unless you start facing some of them. And it can be a really gentle approach. It's not, let's open the lid of the box and deal with it all in one
Yeah.
go. But it doesn't also mean that you have to sit in front of a therapist. It could be just the podcasts you decide to start listening to, the books that you start listening
Mm,
to, what you're not going to start to turn off certain things on the TV that aren't lifting you up or making you feel better about yourself.
yeah.
It's everything you surround yourself with, the arenas that you put yourself in. So it doesn't have to be spending out and paying for a professional's time at this moment. It's just take a step,
Yeah.
take one step. So surround yourself with people or read things or listen to things, but just take a step. You can do it. You can make yourself a
Wow,
priority.
Steph, that is so good. That is so good. And I know someone listening needs to hear that and needs to take that first step today. So I'm so happy that you said that and that you acknowledged it doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can be a small first step that really doesn't require any money or really a lot of time. I
No.
mean, putting on a podcast when you're driving in the car about something that promotes healing can be, the
Yeah.
first step towards a brand new future that you might not even see as possible at this point. So I love that you said that and that you made it so tangible. For our listeners who want to connect with you, where can they find you? What do you offer?
So I work one-to-one with my clients, and obviously I am UK based, but I have clients across the world. So I work online, and for anyone that is listening in the UK, I do work face to face as well. But for any international clients, I work online. I offer one-to-one therapeutic mentoring. That's what I call it, because again, I consider myself. I walk beside women as they heal. I'm not telling them what they need to do. I'm just walking beside whilst they find their way. So I consider myself a mentor as opposed to a coach or anything else, because women have the answers. They know what they need, or they know what's been buried. They just need a safe network or support system to help them open it up, and then they can work through it themselves. So I work in that way. I also have a podcast myself, and that every Monday morning it drops, and it's just 10 to 15 minutes of a tool that I might share or a personal reflection that I help my clients move through. And so that goes out every Monday morning as well. And I work very much from my podcast is called Just for Today, because I work from a place of, let's just look at today. Let's just see what small changes we make
I love
today.
that.
We don't need to worry about tomorrow. We're just going to work on today. What can we do today, just for today? Because sometimes it's too much to think about anything further than today.
Yeah.
For some women, it's just so big, I don't even know where to start. Okay, just for today,
Yeah.
read a book. Just for today, take yourself out for a coffee. Just for today, go for a walk. And that's what my podcast is called, because I want to just inspire as many women as I can just to make themselves a priority just for today.
I love that. That is so great. Steph, where can they find you on social media, website? I know what's in the show notes, but for people listening, where can they find you?
Sure. You can mainly find me on Instagram, and I am Steph Grainger is my handle. And you can find me on my website, which is stephgrainger.co.uk.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Steph, for being on the show and for being part of the Mom Boss Central community. We're so happy to have you and for all the tangible tips you shared, the advice, and the vulnerability of what healing can look like for those who are needing a nudge to take that first step. So thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Mom Boss Central. I hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and maybe even a few new strategies to rock your mom boss journey. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And don't forget to share the love with your fellow mom bosses. Make sure to join the community at mombosscentral.com. It's completely free and a space to connect with like-minded women. All you have to do is sign up and start connecting. Until next time, keep pursuing your passions and living authentically. We're so happy to have you as part of the Mom Boss Central community.